stupid. They are so incredibly stupid. Hey, folks. This is Insurrection with Brenton Lengel. Special Brent debates the LGBTQ agenda. So this is a series of 2 debates. If you haven't seen them, they are linked in the description. I haven't uploaded them to the channel because I'm a lazy bastard. I have been working to get together a Kickstarter campaign for Durruti number 2, which I just got approved. And there's some really cool big stuff in the works for it. So that's really exciting. But yeah, these are 2 debates I did. The first one was with Neo-Nazi JF Gariepy. And when I say that, I am not being, not superfluous. What's the word?
You're not being hyperbolic?
Hyperbolic. There we go. I almost said Hyperborean.
Brenton was king by his own hand. That is a story for another day.
Yeah, so the first one, JF Gariepy, literal neo-Nazi, hangs out with Richard Spencer, actually funded by the Jeffrey Epstein, of recent infamy. And somehow modern day debate thought that a guy like him who's a literal groomer, you guys can go on, you can see the article on the Daily Beast about it. Like it wasn't an underage girl, but it was a girl with the mind of an underage girl. She was like, I think 19 and highly mentally damaged in some way. And according to a court psychiatrist or psychologist, like they looked at her, and they found that she had the mind of like a 10 or 11-year-old girl.
You know what I like about talking to you, Brent, is that I always hear the happiest stories.
Yeah, so that was who they had for my first opponent, and I did a full debate on that against him, the Nazi groomer. And then I also did a debate later, the same debate, against a guy by the name of Haz. People thought he went by Infrared, but I guess Infrared is like his group that he started. But his whole thing is he's a Maga Communist, kind of out of that recent like Pat Soch attempt, basically trying to appeal to the far right and convince them that communism is the way to make America great again.
Where do you find these people, brother?
I don't find them. James at Modern Day Debate finds them.
God bless him.
Yeah, I didn't even know who JF Gariepy was until he specifically challenged me, and turned out he bit off way more than he could chew. So anyway, I did these 2 debates. Both of the debates, and this is funny, a little bit of inside baseball. So James was like trying to come up with the topic for the debate, exactly how it should be, and he's like, how about we do is the left pushing their ethics onto kids? And I was like, I don't think that's the right, or their sexual ethics onto kids. I was like, I don't think that's a good title, because technically don't rape is sexual ethics, and obviously kids should be taught not to rape. So like, I was basically like, well, how about this? I said, is the left trying to make kids gay or trans? And James he's like, I don't think anyone believes that. And I'm like, no, James, the whole far right believes that.
Oh, my sweet summer debate daddy.
Yeah. James, it was actually kind of adorable. But yeah, so essentially the 2 debates that I had were against the conspiracy theory that leftist groomers in academia are trying to make kids gay or trans. And I was taking the negative position because that's absolutely ridiculous and has no evidence whatsoever behind it. And they took the positive position because they hate gay people. Probably
not just gay people, the whole LGBTQ spectrum.
Yeah.
And some other folks.
And I've noticed, by the way, it used to be that like you would say like LGBTQIA or LGBTQIA plus to try to be more inclusive, but now the far right is just saying it to try to mock the LGBT community. So that's why I say LGBT or LGBTQ. I think Q, as if you have that to stand for queer, covers everything. And older people don't say what.
I think most of the people I know in that community judge more intent than getting the exact acronym.
Exactly. But yeah, so that it was just something I had noticed that you would see, like, I think it was Haz, it might have been JF. When I was doing research for the stream, I just noticed they were very purposefully giving like the whole acronym over and over again. And I'm like, okay, they're doing this to mock people. Yeah. So that was the level of opponent that I was dealing with. And Bobby, I forced you to watch both of these debates. So well, set the stage.
So the first one, I forget what I was doing. Oh, the first one was actually a rough time for me because my granddad broke his ribs falling on a auto jack.
Oh, damn.
And when I got home, you sent me the debate, and I was like, God damn it, Brent, I'm not going to do this tonight. So it got kind of put off, which is why we're doing it now. Mm-hmm. And then this last one, when we finally got around to it, I had to watch it again because I mind hole these pretty quick after I watch them as a defense mechanism. And
for the best.
Yeah, my stepdad's house got flooded in Hurricane Nicole and damaged a little bit in Hurricane Ian. So yesterday I was spending the day taking up his kitchen tile with a hammer and a chisel on the floor listening to this debate.
You be doing like the manliest shit whenever you watch my debates. You're like building a shed or recrafting.
Physical labor helps me like tune out the Nazi shit and take out my aggression. Where I'm like, I think I was DMing you a few times too, and we'll get into it. But like, I thought this gentleman Haz was a lot more on it than he was. I'm trying to be very nice. Any opinions expressed by Bob are his alone, and not necessarily those of Brent. And JF is just a disaster piece, nightmare moron. I think it's very curious that their positions on this issue line up.
Yes, it's the same position. The only thing I think, like, from my read on both of them, JF, the neo-Nazi, seemed to be less like he knew he was lying, and it was really obvious. Haz, I think he has somebody described to me afterwards as like NPC dialogue trees that he goes through.
Very much.
And so I took a much less combative approach with him, and instead, because I noticed he would make these very wild, broad claims. And instead of getting triggered by that or anything, what I would do was ask him to elaborate. Because once you get past the conspiracy theory that he's genuinely or generally, gesturing in the direction of, like, there's nothing under it. There's no actual crimes that he's been able to uncover. There's no actual organization doing this. It's just, oh, well, George Soros and these NGOs that are pro-LGBT exist, therefore they are trying to indoctrinate children.
It's weird they always go after Soros.
Yeah, gee, I wonder why.
I wonder why that is. I wonder what dialectical reasoning there could be that they always go after Soros.
Yeah, it's funny too, because they not only they'll go after Soros on both sides. This wasn't said by either JF or Haz, but I know it's very common on the far right to go after Soros for being a Nazi. They will claim Soros was a Nazi because he told a story about how he had to pretend to be a Christian as a child, and like I think it was they were like basically stealing the property of Jews, and he was forced as a kid in hiding to just sort of go along with this.
He was in like as I understand it, he was forced to join the Hitler Youth and had to deliver the notices that they were seizing property.
Oh, wow. Yeah. So they're like, oh, George Soros is a Nazi, or George Soros is an evil billionaire, and they think that those types of people should have won the war. Or in Haz's case, I think what he's doing is he has gone even further on the tanky end than tankies, and so he identifies himself as a Stalinist and a Lysenkoist, which the only reason to do that, the Lysenkoist part, is to deny Holodomor, because Lysenko's theories are idiotic. Like everybody knows they're idiotic today. But back then they were politically convenient scientific theories for the people in charge. So they let him run their agriculture program, and hey, giant disaster. So trying to essentially rehabilitate Stalin and Lysenko and express his idea of communism across as like a heavily macho kind of, I mean, like, from what I understand, he was trying to recruit MAGA people by saying that, like, oh yeah, we're communists and communism comes from the word common. And I was like, oh, he's almost right, he's almost there. And then he's like, so it means the common good and that we focus on things that we all have in common. And I'm like, oh God.
It's almost like he hasn't read Marx, or he's pretending not to. I think he has. I've seen some of his other content after you turned me on to this.
Yeah, he's read them. His interpretation, I think, is way off.
Yeah.
But he clearly has. Like, we had a somewhat interesting conversation about Engels, who literally wanted to destroy the family. Like, that was a big thing with Engels. And Haz tried to frame it as, well, no, in fact, he didn't want to destroy the family. He said that capitalism and socialism would eventually outlaw a particular kind of family. Which I countered with, yes, that's what Christians mean when they say people want to destroy the family. Like, it's not like they're trying to destroy family in general. It's that this one very specific kind of family that was the precursor to the one that Republicans defend now. So
it's weird to me because during the Bolshevik Revolution and Russian Civil War in the last century, it reminded me of a weird piece of white army propaganda that they would put out about the Bolsheviks, is that they were going to make everybody sleep under one giant communal blanket, and they were going to number the women and like pair them off based on like numbering, and they were going to tattoo a number on the woman's forehead for whose wife she was that week, and there would be like a cyclical thing under the communal blanket. Like, that was like
so hang on. So are they changing the tattoo every week, or
no,
a wheel?
No, it's like Artyom, you're like married to Ludmilla on the first week of the month, and then the third week of the month you're married to like Ivanova over here, and then we're all sleeping under one giant communal blanket in a warehouse.
Wow.
Yeah.
Aside from the communal blanket, because I can smell that just thinking about it, and
it smells like
and the warehouse. So they're just doing wife swapping, but it's not even the fun kind.
Yeah, exactly. It's based on a chart.
Like, this is your day to do the dishes. Okay, this is your day to be married to Ted.
Yeah. Well, there's no keys because no one has a car, so they can't put the keys in the bowl or anything. So
yeah. Oh God. All right. So yeah. All right. So I felt like in the first debate with JF, I think I was very strong throughout the debate. I think, and you can tell me if I'm wrong about that, but I think my strongest moment was when I got JF to admit that the chart that he had drawn up, that, like, he said that people like there are more gay people in terms of surveys in blue states than red states. So clearly the blue states are making people gay. And then I asked him, like, oh, because he put up this big map of it. I'm like, what is the source in this map? And he's like, it was my map. I did it last night. And I'm just like, oh my God.
So in one night he got all of the gays and plotted them in the country.
Yeah. And so, though, he did seem to genuinely not know that gay kids get kicked out of their house.
Yeah, like the thing that the right wingers bring up, and they've brought up for my whole life, and I'm sure yours too, is that, like, there's more and more people identifying as LGBTQ over time. And really, it's not like there's more people necessarily in the population identifying that way. It's that we're becoming more tolerant. And so they're not terrified of being kicked out of the house. They're not terrified of literally going to prison, which was a thing up until, I believe, like almost the 80s. I think you could go to jail in parts of this country for that.
I think there are still some laws on the books that you can, like Texas sodomy laws.
Yeah, well, I mean, when the Stonewall riot happened, I forget what year that was, maybe you could check for me as I'm
I've been to the Stonewall Inn.
I have too. The craft beer was okay, but it was a nice atmosphere.
Yeah.
But
I was there to see a burlesque show, and I wound up hanging out with a friend of Lindsay Ellis's, actually. And what was it? It was it was Mara Wilson, who is an ex-friend of hers. She was there, and the other Lindsay's other friend from like that guy with the glasses. They just happened to be there, and so we were kind of hanging out, and that was an interesting evening.
Yeah, I prefer the Ear Inn down in the meatpacking district, but that's just this my preference. But because the bar in the B burned out, but well, the
Stonewall riots were in 1969.
Okay, so in 69, the cops could literally arrest people, and they would routinely roust gay bars, even in like progressive New York. So like we haven't had basic human dignity for LGBTQ people for that long, and in that whole time, the right has been saying like they're trying to convert your kids to being in this lifestyle, which is not really borne out by any sort of material data.
No, certainly not. Well, and so that was really so the tactic that I took, and I think it worked better on Haz than JF, because JF kind of just denied it. Whereas Haz, he knows he's a tanky. He knows he has to be materialist, and pointing out from the very beginning that the idea that you can make kids gay by indoctrinating them is it's obviously literal idealism. So that was one of one of my major points. Like, how strong did you feel that was?
I think you came off strong both times. You were more forceful with JF, which is good because he's an explicit Nazi, and you always have to be forceful with these people. You can't really give them an inch because they'll take a mile. With Haz, you could have been a little more forceful, but I think the conversation flowed a little better because you were more interrogating him. I like that you asked him to define his terms a few times, and he definitely stumbled over that because these people use these terms and they don't have a clear definition for it. It's really they're just trying to use these words like indoctrination, LGBTQ, trans people, whatever, as a trigger to make people angry, basically, without thinking. So when you ask them to define their terms, they tend to stumble, which is a very good tactic that I'm glad you took with that. I think it's interesting in the case of Haz. I would expect it from JF that their worldview on humanity would be idealistic, I guess, or pure ideology would be a better way of putting it. But it's interesting that Haz took that track, especially when both of them are basically arguing for a natural hierarchy that they believe is preferable to whatever's happening in the modern sense. Sorry.
Yeah, that is really interesting too, because like as I pushed him further and further on that, he basically said that what he doesn't like is that people are getting like that gay people are changing society and society's getting confused and shit, which might be telling on yourself a little bit there, guy.
A little bit. Well, it also forgets, and I sent you a DM about this. It completely forgets the concept of the new socialist man that, ironically, like the Stalinists were trying to embrace. Like if you look at propaganda in the USSR, especially after Stalin takes power, there's all kinds of like pictures of Stalin embracing like all the different peoples of the Soviet Union, because people tend to think of Russia as like a mono culture, but it's really like dozens and dozens of different ethnic groups. So the whole thing with like Stalinism at that time is they were trying to obliterate previous national identities or ethnic identities or even religious cleavages and create the new socialist man. And like Haz is talking about like going back to nature, and that's very much not in the canon of like even orthodox Marxism.
Yeah, I mean so like Marxism, and I remember he brought up Mao, and he was like Mao wasn't progressive, and I'm like, dude, like, obviously people that far in the past, are not necessarily going to be socially progressive to us. But like, if you read some of the stuff that Mao was talking about, like literally, like he's sitting there basically giving the fully automated, space communism thing.
Yeah, I mean, he completely tried to obliterate traditional Chinese culture. Like to the point where he was like burning old monasteries and trying to obliterate traditions. Like,
which is why the Shaolin monks like went away for a while, and why like the modern Shaolin temple that you can visit and actually learn kung fu at as well, if you want to, is like, yeah, it's there, but there's kind of been a break in the tradition, so it's partially real and partially a tourist trap.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting how the modern Chinese state has kind of gone back to ethnocentrism, but that's a
Mhm.
whole nother stream. You should watch the movie Wolf Warrior 2 because that's a terrible movie, but it's like Chinese ethnic propaganda action
Mhm.
movie.
Yeah,
Uh,
I'll have to check it out. I
yeah.
remember a friend of mine, we watched, what was it? Jet Li's, it wasn't really his last movie, but he said it
Oh,
was going to be his last movie.
Fearless or something, right?
Fearless,
Yeah.
yeah. And you see the him fighting the American wrestler.
Yeah.
I remember a friend of mine, who ironically became a tanky later, was just like, I was really uncomfortable seeing like Chinese nationalism on the screen.
It's like now you know how everybody else in the world feels when they watch our movies, bro.
Yeah. Oh, geez. Yeah. Well, I loved it that they with the American wrestler. I loved it that they made it that Jet Li was really respectful to him, but he didn't speak Chinese, so the translator lied to him to make him mad.
Yeah, he says your bald head's ugly. Yeah, something like that. Haz, it's also worth noting, kind of didn't know what Cartesian doubt was, and you guys spent like 20 minutes talking around that.
Yeah, you mentioned that to me. So Cartesian doubt, from what I understand about
Right.
it, is it's basically like doubting everything down to I think therefore I am, and then building back up from that. Is that correct, or
Yeah,
am I thinking of something different?
yeah, basically. So interestingly, a lot of people only quote the end of that quote. And I'm not going to do the Latin because I'm going to mispronounce everything, but the actual quote translates to I doubt, therefore I think, therefore I exist.
Hmm.
So from that, it's like methodological doubt. We kind of use it in the scientific method,
Hmm.
and a lot of other things in our lives. Materialism is kind of also sort of contingent on that doubt, where you have to materially prove things exist and whatnot.
Yeah.
It doesn't necessarily really apply to like gender identity because you're not really trying to indoctrinate children into thinking like all the time about their gender and like doubting
Right.
everything. Like you're what people are doing these days is allowing people to authentically live in the way that they feel.
Hmm.
And it's not like there's a teacher in a classroom somewhere with like kindergartners thinking like, well, little Billy, you picked up the Velociraptor toy. Like, why did you do that? Do you doubt that it exists? Does the Velociraptor exist, or is it a demon? As clever as he is evil, that is
Yeah,
deceiving your senses.
the Velociraptor meme.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Well, I mean that was like a Descartes thing where he kind of accidentally invented the Matrix, where he kind of proposed that like you might be a brain in a jar, and there might be a demon as
Mhm.
clever as he's evil that's just simulating the world around you. So, but that's not something that's happening in public schools. I don't think I even talked to anybody about Descartes until I got to college, or like Cartesian doubt.
Yeah. Well, it's so weird that so it's like they hear about this stuff going on in like really high level academia,
Hmm.
critical race theory, or like the kind of stuff you'd get taught in like a gender studies class, and then like they just assume it's being taught to children, and like then extrapolate from that there's these leftists within academia who are trying to actively indoctrinate people as part of a conspiracy to, I don't really know, like usually it's to create communism if you're on the far right, but then Haas wants communism, so he didn't really have like why that was even happening, if
I
I
think
don't recall.
so. For like, yeah, for JF, it was to like destroy the West, which is like this long running thread
Mhm.
on the far right, where they don't know what the West is, but the communists are out to destroy it by making people live happily.
Yeah.
And with
Meanwhile, Haas is a commie and does want to destroy the West.
yeah, exactly. Which is weird because he advocates a lot for Western style imperialism in certain
Yeah.
parts of the world. But on the other side, he's talking about building like obedient drones for capitalism,
Hmm.
which doesn't really also track with like having LGBTQ people live authentically, because it doesn't really do anything for capitalism necessarily one way or the other. My favorite was when he started talking about MK Ultra, because I've been replaying the Deus Ex games, which I don't know if you're familiar with, and they talk about like a lot of that stuff, and I'm like, this dude sounds like a bad NPC from Deus Ex.
Well, maybe he got that from Deus Ex. Who knows?
He might have. I'm waiting for him to say that the UN was built on land donated by John D. Rockefeller. I'm like, okay, you know.
I'm sure somebody could incept that into him.
Yeah, I'm sure he might listen to this. He might use that point going forward.
It's very possible. By the way, so there were two reasons I wasn't very forceful with him.
Yeah.
One is I wanted to be a little bit more Socratic in this, and I figured there's a fear that some people have on the left of platforming, and basically the idea that you give somebody with bad ideas a platform to speak. Somehow those bad ideas will be so enthralling that they'll just brainwash a bunch of people who otherwise wouldn't have those ideas, which again, it's fucking idealism yet again. Like, again, I'm not saying that propaganda doesn't have a purpose or doesn't work. It obviously works. But, I think as I brought up in the debate, it's not, you can't propagandize someone into believing that they're gay. Like, in much the same way you cannot do gay reparative therapy on someone and cure them of being gay. You're just torturing them, which ironically is all that from what we have of the record, it's really all that MK Ultra did was kind of turn the CIA into a frat house for a while, and also prove that you could completely break a person if you gave them drugs and tortured them enough.
Yeah, that was like the whole thing. It wasn't like a giant social engineering project. And I mean, well, CIA definitely does have programs for that sort of thing. That wasn't like what MK Ultra was. You're absolutely right.
Yeah.
And it's like the US government doesn't have like an incentive to incept people into joining the LGBTQ community that doesn't like increase their power worldwide at all.
Yeah. Well, how would that even work? The closest thing I think there is like, it's kind of a meme joke at this point, but what was it? Trans woman drone pilots.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. That's been a thing for a minute. Yeah. We need
trans women drone pilots of color.
I saw a really good meme about that with the Ukraine thing, and I'm sorry to derail you, but
no, please.
Where it was the manly Russian soldier, and he's crying, and he's like, "No, you can't just drop a JDAM on me. I'm so manly. I did so many push-ups." And it's like an SJW type 2015 person with the colored hair, and they're drinking a boba tea, and they're like, "Oh my God, JDAMs are so Virgo, Slay Queen." Just obliterating like a formation of T90s.
Yeah. If I had wanted to, I could, because I thought about possibly getting into a point in the debate, because my strategy was to be nice and more Socratic, unless he gave me a reason not to be. And then if he did, I was just gonna antagonize and trigger him until he just completely lost his shit.
Yeah.
Which is not hard to do because a lot of his debates do end up with him screaming at people.
Does it really?
Yeah, it's really bad. You should look up his debate. He did a debate. It was him and Hinkle against Destiny and he's even been on my freaking thing. The guy who does the Hippy Dippy podcast.
Burns, right?
Dylan Burns, yeah. It's terrible. I've been on his show. He's been on my show, and I couldn't think of his name. I'm getting old, Bobby.
Yeah, me too, brother.
It's just a file not found half the time when I reach for a word.
Well, I was going to suggest that if you were going to make fun of him, you can make fun of his awful Matt Best beard.
Oh, you mean wait?
The fake Navy SEAL guy.
Oh yeah. Matt Best. That's funny. Yeah. So, I mean, what I would say is, with regard to Haz, a lot of his debates tend to devolve into like he will have kind of intellectual things to talk about. I won't say that he's completely pseudo-intellectual because there was a level he could actually engage on philosophically. Yeah. It was a little bit more than I was expecting.
It's more than you usually get.
Yeah. Well, part of it was also apparently he was running on little sleep, or at least that was his excuse. So Like what was really interesting also, and I rewatched the thing on his channel to see what his followers were saying. And like when I watched it at the beginning, he had like, we go to do the debate beginnings, our opening statements. I always put a lot of effort into mine. James usually gives 12 minutes. So I had written out a big 12-minute thing. I timed it. It was ready to go. And and Haz and a lot of these debate streamers they just talk off the cuff for like 3 minutes or something most of the time, which I mean, okay, but this just further goes on. Like when people are complaining about debate bros, I'm like, those guys aren't even debate bros; they're just arguers. So he had apparently typed to his chat, "We're not going to listen to this for 12 minutes," and I genuinely think he did not listen to several of the points that I made, specifically because I thought it was just an error, but he would come back to points that I'd already made, and I basically just had to repeat myself. So I would say if you're in a debate, do not ignore your interlocutor's opening statement, because that really, really leaves you open for stuff. And I think the only reason that he was able to get away with that with his audience is that he's curated a certain amount of anti-intellectualism among them. There's a lot of kind of really silly like false masculine bravado. Like it almost reminded me, and I know he's really young, so maybe that's a bit of it, but like it really struck me like that move with the audience, that strikes me as something like a 19-year-old kid who thinks he's popular would pull, as opposed to actually trying to engage with the discussion, which, to be fair, he did further, and he just missed a couple of stuff from my opening.
Yeah, it inoculates the audience against doubt in the speaker to say that you don't have to listen to this, especially if it's something that he can't or won't address later. And a lot of these debate bros, and present company excluded, they remind me of like a negative portion of my life a little bit, in that like they're the smart high school student who hasn't actually done the reading yet, and they're clever enough to kind of engage the material, but not maybe educated enough to really understand the context of it or interpret it properly.
Yeah. No, that makes a lot of sense. I think a lot of gifted kids, myself included, kind of struggle with that, because with regular school, we could kind of scrape by on intellect alone.
You could power through algebra pretty easily.
Yeah. Whereas, in college, that doesn't fly as much anymore.
No.
And so like a lot of like gifted kids get hit pretty hard. I went to an all boys boarding school in college that was pretty ritzy. And, I will say, there were a number of reasons why I did not enjoy my time there. But one of the issues with the academics was they demanded that you have, a deeper ability to engage with the subject, and I just wasn't used to doing that. I was used to being smart enough to just skim something and through context clues and everything, basically, fake my way through an assignment. And now that I think about it, that does really feel like debate bro culture,
quote unquote. It is, and it's bad for it's something I don't like about it, because it's bad for debate, because you get people not necessarily engaging in bad faith, but you get people who are kind of unable to really grasp the topic that they're debating, and it drags the discourse down.
Like that Is There a War on Women panel that we did.
Exactly, but they have enough kind of guttural charisma to attract an audience. And if the audience isn't informed and there's a charismatic speaker, they can be kind of duped into believing some really awful stuff. In this case, I take a special exception to it, because it affects the human rights and dignity of people that I know and care about, or human beings in general, because an attack on one is an attack on all. But
an injury to one is an injury to all.
Exactly correct. But it worries me, because he's presenting himself as a leftist, and he's taking the position that there's a natural hierarchy that needs to be enforced, and that it's preferable, which is an element of another political belief that was really popular in the mid-30s in Germany.
I mean, it's very true, to tell you the truth. Like I mean, and one of the things that I was trying to do without the debate, that's why I was quoting Che Guevara, that's why I was mentioning, for instance, that the Bolsheviks immediately decriminalized homosexuality, you know, and Stalin did roll that back. But as I've said in the debate, that was more well, one, it was Stalin. But two, that was more to curry favor with the Russian Orthodox Church as opposed to a sincerely held belief. Though Stalin was homophobic. What's really funny now, by the way, with the ML Patsosh phenomenon now, and like with Haz and that Hinkle guy and everything, I have noticed that a lot of MLs have stopped trying to go for culture war owns and now have the opposite position. I remember there was one ML who got super mad a couple of years ago. I forget exactly what we were debating about, but it had something to do with Stalin. And I pointed out that Stalin had this weird fascination with like men's bodies. He did like gay stuff and like nudity, because he had to approve, like, I guess, artwork. And so like when artwork that came across his desk that was like male nudes and stuff, he would decline to pass it and write his own little comments. And it would be like, so it would be stuff like, learn Marxism, not onanism. Is that what?
Yeah, it's the biblical thing for spilling the seed.
Yeah, learn Marxism, don't fap.
Yeah, I was trying to be more classy about it, but yeah, that's it.
You know, so like I remember just a couple of years ago, a guy who is almost definitely within that, you know, Patsosh Maga Communism orbit, just from the type of ML he was, who like just got super angry because he was all about, at the time, Stalin being a champion for gay rights. And Stalin could never have ever said or done anything homophobic. So it's very interesting to see that completely reverse in this generation of like internet communists. I feel like it has a lot to do with the fact that they're more Russophiles than anything.
Yeah, you know, it's interesting too, because he brought up Stalin talking to Hoyo about the Hoyo is a cigar I like, but
I always say that was on my mind. I never heard it pronounced before. I always thought of him as Hoxha.
I think that might be right. I'm going to go with his because I'm assuming he knows how to pronounce
he probably does.
Actually, curious fact about him: his country still actually has the most bunkers per square mile in the world, even though it's a very tiny country. He built like a bunker. I think it's every like 30 meters there's a concrete bunker in that country that he built. Yeah, it's curious. If you go there's some of them are converted into cafes. People use them for farming. It's hilarious, because he thought he was going to defend against NATO with these concrete placed bunkers, but
as we've learned, that's not a good way to defend against NATO.
That doesn't work. But the curious thing is that conversation he brought up when Stalin said the religious sentiments of the people must not be offended. What he was talking about was during World War II, he opened up the churches again, and there's actually Stalinist propaganda where it's like, Comrade Stalin, friend of the church, and it's got like Stalin like over the church in like an angelic like pose, you know. Stalin was talking not about like not offending the religious sensibilities of the people to appeal to them for consent. What he was talking about was subordinating the church to the party and using the church as an institution of social control, much like the czars did.
Yeah. Well, and that makes a lot of sense, because Stalin, famous atheist, like the reason Stalin is he was sent to a notoriously horrifying seminary that was again, like, this place was known for churning out like really aggressive atheists, because its program was so abusive. And like a lot of the stuff that Stalin went on to do in the USSR, you know, the forcing people to like snitch on other people, the constant surveillance, all of that he learned while he was being taught at this seminary. And particularly there was one priest, and I swear to God, this is not out of some Victorian novel. This is real. There's a priest named Black Spot. We don't know what his real name was, but he was bald and had a big ass gross mole on the top of his head. And like he totally had it out for Stalin while Stalin was at the seminary. And
well, he was right.
yeah, but not for the right reasons. Yeah. And who knows? Maybe Stalin would have been an awesome guy if he hadn't been, abused by that freaking priest. For
critical support for Black Spot. That's all I'm saying.
Oh, that's funny.
In this case,
critical. Yeah. So you're right. And so like it is very weird to me that I'm seeing Marxism, the aesthetics of Marxism, being twisted into a right-wing thing. Now, I had heard, and I don't know enough about it other than I'm vaguely familiar with the guy's biography. I've heard people saying that the Pat Soch Maga Communism thing is just Lyndon LaRouche, like rebranded. Do you have any? I know your dad was in a cult, so
he is. He still is. Just talk to him. Actually, he's doing pretty good in the cult.
Hey, Bobby's dad, leave your cult.
No, he's good there. He's doing good in the cult.
I'm happy.
Got wooden nickels and tofus on Sunday, but I don't know if I'm making that up. That's the sad part. No, like it is a lot of LaRoucheism. For my sins, I am a little bit familiar with Lyndon LaRouche, not intimately so. I'm more familiar with Lind and the far right movement, like kind of after him. It also does take a bit from Dugin. And a lot of international right-wing movements, kind of a little bit like the Saudis have funded over the years, Wahhabism, like overseas. We're seeing like far-right governments now funding other far-right movements overseas. And I'm not saying Haz is like an agent. That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is that like far-right talking points have like international funding behind them, and they get spread a lot. So you will see like older like LaRouche and Lind talking points getting amplified by things like cable news networks, by a Facebook page that spends like $2 or $3 million on advertising and gets 100,000 followers or whatever. So you will see a lot of those same talking points, even if the speaker doesn't know that's what he's doing explicitly, get put out there.
The idea keeps getting projected, but they don't necessarily know where it comes from. I mean, like even with Dugin, from what I understand, with Dugin is that he's not as influential in Russia as Americans think he is. He is influential, but a lot of his ideas are less. They're either plagiarized or they aren't really embraced by Putin. Like when Putin gave his like big speech before he annexed, several territories that he does not actually entirely control. He wasn't citing like Dugin in his speech. He was citing some other Russian philosopher who was a explicit Nazi.
Well, Russia has the biggest Nazi movement in the world. What people like Dugin are over there is what somebody like what's the other weird little kid who wears the suits that doesn't fit, really likes Trump, white nationalist.
Nick Fuentes.
That's what he would be over there.
Oh.
Except older and uglier.
Oh God. Oh, I'm glad I got to debate him.
Oh, did you? Oh, you did in that one panel. Yeah, you're right.
in the panel, you could tell he was really intimidated, actually, because afterwards he talked about it. He was like, "Well, this guy's probably the least famous," and I'm like, "Yeah, dude. Like, obviously, I'm probably the least famous one on the panel, but I'm also the fucking smartest one on the panel, and that is not saying much." And
your suits fit.
Yeah. I should, Oh, I gotta tell you, I feel bad for Fuentes.
I don't.
I mean, he made his bed, but like talking to him as opposed to just experiencing him through his YouTube channel, or his former YouTube channel, like when you engage with his content, he seems like just this incredibly hateful monster. But when you like actually talk to him, and you listen to kind of the way he talks about himself and the way he's clearly like completely delusional, and he's definitely got this like massive psychic wound that he is hiding.
I'll send you a video that I saw a while back, if I can find it again, where somebody was talking to somebody who went to high school with him, and you kind of hit the nail on the head there.
Sorry, were you looking for something?
Oh, no, I'm sorry.
Yeah,
I was interrupting
so
you.
by the way, I wanted to bring this up. Carson B, $3. Hey, Brenton, saw the debate. Keep up the good work. Thank you very much, both
man.
for the $3, and for the kudos, because sometimes it can feel like you're screaming into the void, particularly with modern day debate audiences.
Carson B, you are a really cool guy because I see you have a revolver ocelot profile picture. I just registered recently for cowboy action shooting, and you have to register a Old West alias to go with your cowboy action shooting. So people usually pick like Laredo Kid or whatever, but I'm Revolver Bob Salot. And no one gets it who goes to cowboy action shooting. This is my opportunity to share that.
That's beautiful. By the way, guys, so if you get Durruti #2, Shadow of the People #2, which is about to come out, I've actually got the link. You can pre-follow the Kickstarter starting tonight. If you look there, I've had enormous specificity with the particular guns that you're going to see in this. And Bobby was there as my ringer, helping using his gun nerd knowledge to like really add some real specificity to the weapons that you see in the period, the ammunition that is going with them, the particular make and model, and like all of that is it's really beautiful. It's one of my favorite things about the issue.
I'm a very shooty orky boy. I did want to kind of discuss something that I noticed in both debates, and I think you did a very good job about, is that they were talking about the natural biological essence, which definitely sounds like a sex thing.
Yeah.
I guess it refers to sex. But they both missed, and I'm more surprised at Haz for missing this because this was like a very big thing on the Marxist left for a long time, was that existence precedes essence. So like you exist before you kind of realize who you are.
Yeah.
So like
hell, Marx even, like if you read his quote about religion, it's like what he's talking about.
Exactly correct. And you did very well about that with JF, and you did very well about that with Haz, because I love that you pointed out that humanity hasn't existed in a state of nature for potentially thousands of years, tens of thousands of years perhaps. And I love the point, especially you made it with Haz, where you asked him if he owns a coat, and that's not natural. You're wearing wool, and that's a very good point. And he's like, well, the biological essence is more intrinsic to humanity than wearing a coat. And that's, not how I pick up girls. I pick up girls because I wear a cool coat. But but the whole point is that, like, if they're making that argument, then the essence of that person being LGBTQ in whatever way, or whatever way that they're living their life, would be their essence, and they should be able to embrace that. And we should build a society that would allow those people to embrace their natural essences, whether it be identifying as a man, a woman, non-binary, or gay, straight, or whatever.
You know what was absolutely hilarious about that with Haz? And I love that this is another moment that was really good in the debate, where he was like, well, if they're real, because I asked him, I said, what's the difference between, like, an actual marginalized person and a fake marginalized person? It's just being boosted by the society. Like, where's the real? Let's find the real gay person. We both agree that gay and trans people exist. So who are the real ones and who are the fake ones? And he was like, well, if it's real, they'll have to they'll have to engage in like the political process and make their selves known, like regardless of what the society says. I'm like, oh, you just fucking described the gay rights.
Yeah, he did. He accidentally completely described the process people are going through right now that he's against. I also like that you kind of took up a little bit for NGOs and asked him to name NGOs, and he names these shadowy secret cabals. But and I noticed lately that NGOs that I've personally worked with in the past, or I've donated to, take flack from the far right, especially vis-a-vis gender training or advocating for LGBTQ rights overseas. Those people are doing a leftist project in that they're trying to extend human dignity and rights to people who are marginalized and oppressed by governments and societies that largely are imposed upon them, which you pointed out, and a lot of times through brutal colonialism, or just through strict hierarchies that are enforced by a state force. And again, it's curious that the tanky, quote unquote, and the Nazi guy both kind of agree that these hierarchies are a product of nature and not these structures. And Marx explicitly talks about this when he talks about structure and superstructure.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. Well, it's so a lot of the time I will go to James and I'll say, James, I want to do a debate on this particular philosophical concept. And James will be like, nobody cares about that. That's completely abstract. No, you can't do it. And I find that whenever I do these debates, especially against like far right wingers, the core, like it always comes down to they have like one of their core founding principles that they are mentally working from is a mistake. Haz assuming that biological essence exists, which is fucking ridiculous.
It is
yeah. Or that, that society's structure will take a certain, will appear in a certain way always, right. Like if you want to have a debate about hierarchy, like if you want to answer these very salient political questions, and especially culture war questions, oftentimes you have to get to the root of the disagreement. And the root of the disagreement is usually someone has assumed something that they do not know to be the case, and that assumption is guiding every other position that they have. It's kind of like, so when I watched the Professor Flowers Vosh debate, where Vosh called her a Nazi.
Yeah, that was really weird. Yeah, I remember
that. I've known people who, when you're like a fledgling anarchist, a lot of the time, you don't really understand fascism, but you know it's bad.
Sure.
And so in trying to understand it, you will associate people you don't like with fascists. And like, then that becomes fascism for you. And then you take one little bit of criteria and attach that to a fascist movement. And suddenly everyone around you is a fascist. Everyone is pissing you off. I think with Professor Flowers, what I felt Vosh was driving at in the debate was that she was not prepared to go up and denounce movements like anti-colonial movements that don't like make allowances for white people,
right.
My feeling on that is, and that was something to press her on, but it wasn't that he was discovering she was a Nazi. What he was discovering was that Flowers, in my opinion, was working from a fundamental assumption that is wrong. The fundamental assumption she is working from is that Westerners and First Worlders cannot tell people involved in anti-colonial struggle the shape that their movement should take, for right. Obvious reasons. It's a good rule of thumb. And also I figure she probably didn't want to do the same thing where you bring on like, the news brings on a Muslim and makes them apologize for the other bad Muslims,
Right.
So my feeling in it was that her operating ideology underneath every one of her positions was essentially flowing deontologically. And one of the rules that she has is you can't tell them not to do something because it's their country, and while I sympathize with that and while I understand it, there is a real problem there because anti-colonial people are capable of doing evil, and even though it may not be the most politically expedient thing to say, because you come across as a Westerner who's full of themselves telling people how to handle their own liberation. But at the same time, like, if people are engaging in ethnic cleansing or repeating the horrifying systems of power, or replicating those, like the kid who was abused growing up to beat his own kids, you need to be able to call that out. You need to be able to talk about it. And I really think that was the disagreement, but that never got brought up. because I don't think either one of them realized that was where the disagreement was. And so, like, that Vosh accused her of being a fascist, and I think she accused Vosh of being racist, and nobody learned anything.
Yeah, it kind of devolves. At the same time, I will kind of stick up just for myself, just for a second, in that people, I think, also underuse the term fascist, because in the mainstream media, people are a little bit afraid to use it for movements that it actually does apply to.
Very true.
At the same time.
Well, fascism is a notoriously difficult ideology to, it's not even really an ideology, but it's a notoriously difficult thing to identify. And define. I've always liked, there's a couple things that I've always liked with it. I like the one definition of it being, what's the thing? Ultranationalism obsessed with narratives of national palingenetic ultranationalism.
There you go.
Yeah, I think that kind of gets at it. I think Echo's 14 points are a good way of looking at it, but like, really, as you can see, fascist movements take different forms. Now, am I going to say that MAGA communism is just fascism? I won't say that, but it's kind of looking like that.
It seems that way. I don't know enough about it because I'm not going to read a Substack that says MAGA communism. I'm just
please don't.
I'm not doing it.
And it's not anything anybody really needs to concern themselves with unless they're directly dealing with these people online. Like,
there's like 10 people who believe in this stuff, and they're just very vocal.
You are never in your life going to convince fucking MAGA people to become communists. It's just never going to happen.
No.
They, in much the same way that like white supremacy requires there to be like a black person who can never become white, but other people can become white. Like, in the same way, like a far right ideology, a conspiracy-based far right ideology of fascism needs communism to be the thing that they can never approve of. So to try to merge like a red-brown alliance is a complete fool's errand. You can maybe get a hold of some aesthetics, because that's another thing. Like, if communism is popular, fascists will pretend to be communists, but ultimately, like, they're never going to. And then also, like, I feel like the kind of MAGA communist, red, brown, whatever you want to call them, that movement, they're making a massive mistake in that they think Trump's base is the proletariat. And it's not. Like, there are some proletarian people involved in it, but if you look at January 6th and you look at the people that we've known that were there, they're like petite bourgeoisie. I would say they're petite bourgeoisie, and their leaders and mouthpieces are like influencers from the middle class and upper middle class. I mean, the Hinkle guy, I think, was born like super rich. If I'm not mistaken. And I don't think he was involved in January 6th, but these are people who would be involved in the political class. So if you are trying to organize the proletariat, and you're like, well, the best way to find the proletariat is to go find the MAGA people, you're completely wrong right there.
I'd be curious, and I'm thinking about this now, where there was Haz and I think JF2 were both implying that it was on the LGBTQ population to prove that their identity is legitimate and that they deserve basic human dignity.
Yeah.
I would argue from a left perspective that the onus would be on the state and the societal structures that we inhabit to prove that they don't deserve human rights and dignity.
I would agree. I would agree that for two reasons. One, the state is the one making the positive claim.
Sure.
So the onus is on them. But also, two, just from a logical standpoint, if you can either assume that a group is hostile and deserves to have their rights stripped from them and deserves to be treated like garbage, or you can, and until you prove otherwise, that's how you're going to treat them. Or you can assume that someone is not an enemy until they reveal themselves as an enemy. Now, there is one of those that will definitely result in a huge amount of unjust and unnecessary suffering. And it is the former, it is not the latter. Especially if you're coming from a position of a state that already holds all of the power. If, for instance, the dangerous immigrants coming here from South America, if they were actually an invading force, the state is infinitely more powerful than that and will put them down in, no time at all. Whereas if they are actually just people who are coming here for a better life, you don't really risk anything by assuming that, even if, some of them, or even if most of them are actually a subversive element coming into the country and trying to destroy it. Okay, good luck.
Yeah.
I don't think if you've noticed, but the fucking police force and the military is pretty on it.
Yeah. The degree, the speed with which they would put foot to behind on that would be amazing.
Yeah.
Be biblical.
We're seeing it, and again, it's like not even direct.
Yeah.
By the way, oh my God, the weirdest fucking thing happened to me today. But before I go into that, Progressive American. Progressive, I love having you here. Thank you so much.
Connor's great.
Yeah, he is terrific. It is also worth noting that the argument of superstructure versus structure assumes that there is one overarching factor that influences society.
Yeah, it's true. It does. And it's kind of why, if Marx were alive today, a lot of the Orthodox Marxists would probably call him revisionist, because it's been a few years since 1855 when he was doing his work. So I think the base and superstructure model is useful for learning about like political structure and learning about Marxist theory, but like there's been almost 200 years of writing after that, so you really should read people who came after Marx, or even his contemporaries. You
should read, like, for the love of God, just there's I am currently I've just started it, but I'm reading Anarchy's Cossack, which is a history book published by AK Press, who are also publishing Durruti, Shadow of the People #1. Or I'm sorry, not publishing, distributing. And then the other one that I got here, I got this one on Kickstarter. This is No Pasaran.
Oh, that's a good one.
Yeah. This is Anti-Fascist Dispatches from a World in Crisis. This was also put out by AK Press. So these are my reading list for the next few months. But like, yeah. So
I didn't see the CPUSA newsletter on there, comrade. I'm gonna have to report you to Comrade Commissar.
It's, oh my God, the CPUSA. They've taken kind of center stage a few times, like in kind of leftist infighting and slap fights. And I'm just sitting there I'm watching people like gnash their teeth over the CPUSA and the CPUS. And I'm just like, guys, everybody knows, like not everybody, but everybody in the activist sphere knows that the CPUSA are just edgy Democrats. Yeah. Like, that's literally all they're ever going to do. They're not an influential organization,
and there's like 10 of them.
Yeah.
I don't think they have like enough people to fill up a reading room in the New York Public Library. Like, it's not.
Yeah, it's not good, guys. I mean, like even the RCP, which is just a cult for Bob Avakian, like the RCP does more than CPUSA, because at least the RCP will be out there trying to sell you a freaking newspaper, and put out. Okay, so do you remember when the right, I think it was 2017, were freaking out? It was like around Halloween.
The right freaking out? Never.
Yeah, it was around Halloween, or early November. It was November 7th, maybe, that there was supposed to be this revolt, this
Antifa super soldiers were gonna like storm everybody's house.
Yeah,
I had a friend who believed that, and he was legitimately like bunkering down in his house with his like AR and his night vision goggles, waiting for the Antifa super soldiers to come over. And I'm like,
so the reason they thought it was November 7th or 5th or whatever, that was because the RCP, the Revolutionary Communist Party, put out some flyers in New York City and a probably DC and a couple of other places, about a rally they were going to have to refuse fascism in America. And again, I even saw that. I had a job interview at Columbia, and like it was like up in Columbia. I'm like, oh, hey, I know those guys. It's the RCP.
Hey, buddy.
I'm not going to drink their Kool-Aid. I
don't drink anything they give you. Probably is
no.
a bad idea.
I don't think that Babavekian is the second coming of Christ, and Lenin is fused into one, and I don't think that it would be a useful use of my time and energy to sell someone a paper that they don't want.
No, like, and I think you were right to highlight the petit bourgeois nature of that movement, the MAGA movement specifically, and it's interesting because they never prove their case. And I see Connor in the chat, and he finally read Dialectic of Enlightenment. And Connor, come on my show. We'll have to do a book club about this because I've been waiting for somebody to read this for like 2 years. But they just use these terms to drum up like an emotional response from their base. Mm-hmm. And maybe some of them might even have like a superficially good motive for doing that, but it's an unethical mode of communication. Like if you take a communications ethics course, and I'm sorry if you had to do that, you learn that that's like really unethical way to manipulate your audience. And we see that it's, they talk about like the degeneracy of the West or whatever, but we see the degenerative effects of that on our political dialogue, because over the course of our 2 lifetimes, you're a little older than I am, but you look better. Mm-hmm. So there you go.
Thank you, Bobby.
Nah, my pleasure, man. But over the course of our lifetimes, and even in Connor's lifetime, who's a Zoomer, thanks for voting, Connor. You're great. Your generation.
You Pokemon go to the polls.
You guys are killing it. We've seen how much more toxic it's become, and it started with 24-hour news, where they had to what do you call it?
They had to fill 24 hours worth of news.
Compress everything into its most emotional core to like sell people. Mm-hmm. And then we get the internet, and we think the internet's going to be this beautiful thing where we all share principled information. But now the internet has to not only fill those 24 hours on the news, they have to fill every second of your life with the screen time. Yeah. And so we see it even more, and we see people, we see the contradictions in capitalism heightening over time, especially in our lifetimes with the 2008 crash. So you see people becoming more atomized and angry, and people get, I think, much more susceptible to these kind of culture war issues as we get into these kind of periods in capitalism. We definitely, I think, saw it in the 20s and 30s in Europe, and we saw what happened with that. Yeah. And we're seeing like a that movement, I think, in the United States right now, which is why I think it's good that you're engaging these people and pointing out that they can't define their terms, that they're not making the positive case to deny people basic human rights, and that oftentimes they're just like using scare words. George Soros, the whatever society that he was citing as a funding NGOs.
Yeah, there was a thing I wanted to ask. So I was waiting for him to try and call me a cuck, especially since this was really annoying. James was joking backstage, and he didn't know. So whenever we go into modern day debate, there's a little bit of a backstage kind of green room area where we talk and everything. And sometimes streamers will be streaming our backstage to their audience and not tell us.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So James made a joke about me being a cuck. And like, we kind of laughed about it. And if you were smart and watching it, you can clearly tell it's a joke. Yeah. But freaking immediately, like one of the moderators in infrared chat said, "This guy's a cock." Oh, Jesus. I'm just watching him, and he just kept saying it like over and over again in the chat, like throughout the debate while I was reviewing like my performance. I was just like, "Oh my god, dude."
Well, when people are like insecure about like their I'm assuming it's a guy. When people are super insecure about their masculinity, they'll definitely like try to go after your masculinity with the most powerful weapon they think they have. Yeah. And for the right, it's usually, "Oh, you're a cuck, you're a cuck, you're a cuck."
Yeah. Like, you do not control your woman, and you don't keep her love within the race. Like that's really what they're saying.
Yeah, basically.
So I remember, and I wanted to, if he had gone down this route, or if he'd used degeneracy as an argument, he didn't. I don't think he might have brought it up once, but it was like a side point.
Right.
I really wanted him to explain to me what's bad about being a cuck. What's bad about being a degenerate? Because every time I ask this, it always happens. Like the freaking Pepe comes in, and is like, and I'm saying, what's wrong with being a cuck? You're just a poly person getting off, in a particular way. What business of that is of yours? And they'll just be like, well, it's degenerate as fuck. And I'm like, okay, what's bad about being degenerate? Because it sounds like that's just a judgment. You're just throwing snarl words.
Yeah.
And really, I think what they're just getting at is their man not behave like I think man should behave. Oh!
Exactly. And I usually see it from dudes who are like single, like perpetually.
Yeah. Because they're not being themselves. They're not being true to their own masculinity. They're looking at all of the stuff in our popular culture and taking their idea of masculinity from that, which just don't.
I'd love for you to look into this, because you were talking to me a while back about doing a thing about a show about people who are kind of secure in their masculinity, examining these toxic things.
Yeah.
You should look into the Modern Day Night Project, and we should definitely do a show about that.
Modern Day Night Project. I can't tell if this is going to be good or bad.
Oh, it's bad.
From that title.
Oh, it's really bad. It's a fake boot camp that people pay like $15,000 to go to.
Oh, wait a minute. What's the guy's name behind it?
Something with a B.
Okay, Modern Day Night. Raising a Modern Day Knight home. Oh my God. All right. What the fuck?
Yeah.
Guys, look at this. Raising a Modern Day Knight. Okay. Bobby, there's something that you probably know about me, and that I am a huge nerd.
Yeah.
Particularly for like medieval shit.
Sure.
Like,
I fence, dude.
Yeah, I'm a fantasy nerd. I have there's just a whole bunch of fucking swords, like just immediately off camera. Like, and some of them are sharp and good. Some of them are sharp and crappy. Some of them are dull and literally stage combat ready. In fact, hang on, Bobby, entertain the audience for a second.
I guess Brent and I are both sword guys, which is usually like a bad sign for a podcast, but in this case, it's kind of a good one because we're both very secure about it. But there's some real weird sword guys. Oh, hey, there's a sword.
This is how quickly I can just grab one of my stage combat ready swords.
That was like 30 seconds, dude.
Yeah. So yeah, this is a Starfire Blades. I bought this. This was a business expense because I am a playwright, and I was like, yeah, the play I bought it for wound up not being produced. So I was like, well, shit. But then I was like, wait, am I complaining that I got to buy an awesome fucking combat ready sword that's just not sharp? Yeah. So I am a massive fucking nerd for this shit, and I got to tell you, that is lame. The person who put up that Modern Day Night web, I would give that man a wedgie.
That is extremely lame. Well, that's what they're basically paying him for. But
yeah, Bobby, we should. You know what? I'll tell you what. I'm going to look at this, and we'll also talk about the Jordan Peterson's poetry and his song.
Oh yeah, I forgot about the poet. Did you listen to the song?
I did.
I'm sorry.
We got to talk about it. It's beautiful, but not in the way that one would expect.
Terrific.
So yeah, no, like, so I'm a massive nerd, but I got to tell you that guy's a fucking nerd.
Yeah.
And it's also really annoying because during the medieval period, they had a very different idea of masculinity that people have today, and probably completely different. Like, the medieval period thought women were hypersexual and men were much more demure. I remember also there was so it was like men's intellect and our prudence needs to be used to tame the incredibly aggressive female sexuality. So
yeah, and when that society changed, people were saying how degenerate the new society that replaced it was. So in the same way that those people were, the modern failed right-wing movement that we're dealing with is reacting to LGBTQ people being more prevalent. So they have to invent because obsession with the plot is a key part of their ideology. They have to invent a indoctrination program in public schools where teaching kids to share is making them trans and gay or something. I don't know.
It is so dumb. what's so weird is we just keep doing the same shit.
Yeah.
And people don't seem to well, a few people recognize it. Those are the people who read.
Yeah.
But nobody listens to us.
No.
And like these crazy ideas just keep getting repackaged. And there's like yet another moral panic. And you even saw it like with J.K. Rowling, you know, she was, her idea of like her ideas about Harry Potter, they were clearly influenced by the ideology of the New Left in you know, the late 60s and whatever, because you know, she's, I don't know exactly how old she is, but she was probably kind of coming of age around that time. So, you know, Harry Potter has this big don't be racist message, but similarly at the same time, like it makes fun of civil rights. Like when Hermione is trying to organize the house elves, you know, who for the record, like are literal slaves, you know, and everybody's like, oh, it's so silly. Our slave, everybody else, you know, it's bad to discriminate against Muggles, but and mudbloods, but no, the house elves, they're totally down with being slaves.
And obviously the goblins are a big yikes on bikes on trikes. The other one that people forget about is that the groundskeeper Hagrid has to hide his ethnic heritage because he's half giant.
Right. Oh God, you're right. He totally is. And so, you know, she comes in, she's got this, you know, new lefty ideology. It's nice and progressive. And then society changes.
Yeah.
And it's not just gay people. Now trans people are gaining civil rights, and she loses her freaking mind.
Oh, sorry.
No, it's just like you just want to go up to her and be like, do you not see how this is exactly the same thing? It's just, they've just rearranged the details.
There's a great meme where it's the Simpsons pointing at J.K. Rowling going out of a bookstore, and it's look, there's J.K. Rowling, the author of her own public humiliation.
Oh, that's beautiful.
Yeah, it's just true. And it's these same guys that you're arguing against about primarily trans rights in these two debates. And
I argue about trans rights so much that fucking Facebook thinks I'm trans.
Well,
it keeps sending me like ads for transitioning.
My mom uses my Amazon, so she orders like woman stuff off of Amazon, and I order like dude stuff off of my Amazon. So my Amazon thinks I want like size 15 women's shoes, like sometimes, which is really weird.
Yeah. I love how horrifying ad bots have gotten. You know, you're sitting there and you're talking about something that you want, and then suddenly you realize your phone's been listening to you and now it's showing you an ad.
Oh man, I'm getting all kinds of ads for like demolition hammers and stuff right now.
I wonder how quickly I will be getting ads for swords.
Oh, probably pretty fast, man. You should get like a rapier. We could do some Destreza.
Yeah, that would be really fun. Well, you and I need to get together and meet in battle.
Yeah, sure.
So that sounds like it would be really fun. I do have a rapier. It's not combat ready, but I do.
I mean, I don't want to actually get stuck, bro.
Okay. So let me explain. So when I'm talking about like blades, there's the replicas.
It can't take actual combat.
Yeah, it can't take action. Like I have my best sword is an official replication of Strider's Ranger sword from Lord of the Rings.
Oh, I've seen this one. My friend has this one.
Yeah, I used to have it. If you look at kind of my old, I did some old like videos. You can actually see it on the wall, like in my old apartment, directly behind me. That is probably my best sword, but that one's not combat ready. This one is combat ready because, like I said, it's built literally to do stage combat against another blade and not fall apart.
I actually had a bad experience with not combat ready swords once. That was mostly foil, and this guy had a really cheap foil, and we both lunged at each other, and I had right of way, which is a sport fencing thing, which meant that like my blade was going to hit first, so I'd get the point. Yeah. But his point hit the guard of my foil, and he kept coming forward. So it bends and it breaks, right?
And he stabbed you with the
right in the trap, like my left trap. And the judge sees it happen. He's like, "Don't pull it out." And the first thing I do is I yank
You immediately pull it out.
Well, I got the point, which is really hilarious because I won the match, but I actually got stabbed. It was just like ruined
Yeah.
it was so expensive too because in sport fencing in foil, you have a copper jacket that goes over your fencing jacket that completes the circuit to
Mhm.
get on target points. So he stabbed through my copper jacket and through my regular jacket and through my Under Armour. So I was more pissed that he ruined 3 articles of clothing.
Yeah. Then that you'd been stabbed with a broken
I'm like, that's
sword.
like $150, you son of a.
Yeah. I don't know. I would be for, let's just bring back dueling. I think that would be
Oh,
pretty
I'm
badass.
down, man. Yeah. Code Duello, man. I actually have a copy.
Yeah. It was funny. Right before this, I was actually watching ads for Amped Guard that I used to do that in high school. And I was like, oh, I miss that. Did you ever seen the LARPers do their
I have,
thing?
yeah.
Yeah.
I actually, and I'm sorry to keep telling random stories on this stream, but I actually pissed off the Jedis at the local college here a while back.
Oh, I think I remember this. You
Yeah.
told me about this, but let's hear it.
So
I think our audience needs to hear this.
I dressed like a jerk in that I was wearing like nice jeans, a sport jacket, and like a shirt.
Oh God, yes. Fuck you,
Yeah,
Bobby.
yeah, completely. I don't blame anybody. Like I dressed like the jerk from Succession, the
Mhm.
board member, but they're doing their lightsaber fencing. They're like, "You want to try?" I'm like, "Oh, sure." They don't know who they're messing with.
Oh no.
So the kid tries to be like Count Dooku or whatever, and I just lunged, recovered on him, and he fell over.
That's beautiful.
Yeah, I'm like, the force isn't strong with you, bro.
Yeah. This is now a HEMA podcast.
Yeah.
Screw the debates. We're talking about that. No.
Yeah.
All right. So I would say, to get us slightly back on topic here,
Yeah,
because
I'm
I don't
sorry
want to go
about
too. No, I love this shit. I don't want to go too far afield though. So I felt like, with regard to Haz, I felt like I was at my strongest. I don't know, where do you feel like I was at my strongest? Because I know exactly where it was with JF, but
I think the strongest point for Haz with you was asking him to define his terms and watching him kind of stumble, and asking him for like material examples, which he couldn't really provide and didn't.
It was very important, by the way, that I brought up the specifically the Catholic Church conspiracy to traffic minors. Because people thought, as soon as I brought that up, they thought, oh, priests molesting kids. And I'm like, no. This isn't just general priests molesting kids.
The
if you guys
Magdalene laundries,
yeah. Oh God, the Mag. Every time, like, it just gets worse. The more I think about the Catholic Church,
it's amazing it's still around as an institution.
It is fascinating. Yeah, and the thing is that like right wingers, and I'm serious in this, that projection is such a huge part of it. Because, and I even said this in my opening statement, like what's happening here is they're idealists, philosophical idealists, and they think you can indoctrinate someone into sexual behavior, and they want to indoctrinate kids into their version of sexual behavior. Whereas, the left is more about creating a situation within society where everyone can be the freest and best expression of themselves naturally through what they discover by unlashing people from the economic system.
Yeah.
So, even if leftists wanted to indoctrinate kids, you can't make somebody gay by sending them to the library or whatever. So I felt like that was strong. I felt like I was strongest with JF, obviously, when I made him admit that he just made the fucking map himself and was making everything up.
Yeah.
Though it does strike me also that that Sartre quote, "Never believe that anti-Semites are unaware of the ridiculousness of their replies." They're just amusing themselves, and that's JF has done that shit in multiple debates. Like when he claimed to be a Christian in my debate about Kyle Rittenhouse with him.
Also in that same Sartre quote, the implication is also that they don't necessarily care about looking ridiculous as long as it forwards their goals.
Yeah.
So like to gain institutional power or to build a bigger mass movement around the lies that they know they're telling.
Yeah, because I mean, a lot of fascism is pure opportunism.
Yeah.
All right, so I felt that those were my strongest points, was questioning Haz throughout it, and then getting JF on stuff like that. Where do you think I was the weakest?
I don't think you really were very weak in either of these debates, to be honest with you.
That's why I pay you the big bucks, Bobby.
Buy me a beer, bro. I would probably not have been as nice to Haz as you were, but you were, you actually got what you wanted out of it, so it worked very well for you.
Yeah.
With
Well,
JF,
also,
I'm glad that you didn't extend that to JF because he doesn't deserve it. That's all I'm gonna say.
I will be very nice to just about any debate opponent I have, unless they're a fucking Nazi,
which is good policy.
Yeah. And usually, and if there's a question as to whether they're a Nazi, I will usually, extend the benefit of the doubt.
Well, you were very nice to that pimps on blimps guy, so
I turned him into a fucking red Tengu.
You did. That was really funny.
He's about to do another debate. That's Alex Stein. I've been noticing, by the way, a couple of these internet people are showing up on Tucker Carlson. Alex Stein. There's got to be some Republican institution. Like there's no way that's just happening. There's got to be some sort of.
Well, they've been at it on YouTube since this thing started, because there was a guy back in like 2006 days. It was called "How the World Works," and he was an idiot. He was trying to like do right-wing ideology, and he was such an idiot that he had a spinning globe as his intro on YouTube, but it was spinning the wrong way, and he was telling people how the world worked or whatever. But he got a job at Cato off of having like 2,000 YouTube subscribers in 2006.
The fuck?
At that time. So they've been at this for a long time. They've got a ground game on social media.
I have 2,000 YouTube subscribers. Somebody give me a job. No, don't.
Do you want to work at Cato, bro?
No, I do not want to work at Cato.
Let me know when your first day is. I'll bring some popcorn.
Jesus.
Yeah.
No, it would be, that Sally Cohn woman during Occupy, she supposedly had like kind of a left wing. This is the thing. Like, there is no equivalent of that on the far left, because there's no money on the far left at all.
That's our issue.
Yeah. So like it's sort of the same thing as like when the US is supposedly funding moderate rebels. What the fuck? There's no such thing, and similarly, or there is such a thing, but they're the single most horrible people that you'll ever meet.
Or they're just feckless. Like, are we going to overthrow the government today? I don't know, man.
I don't know. Maybe we should just vote, and maybe we should compromise, with the fascists. It was, oh God, that was so. I don't know if you watched this, by the way. I was recently on the Bad Takes podcast.
Oh no, you got to see that. Then.
With one of the guys from Behind the Bastards, which is really cool. And J. Andrew World, and we were going over this zombie movie and this was perfect for me because it's a zombie movie set during the Spanish Civil War. It's on Netflix. And so like I watched it, and it was kind of trying to be like sort of a tongue-in-cheek kind of low budget Shaun of the Dead kind of thing, just set with the Spanish Civil War as a backdrop.
Sure.
And at the end, like, spoilers for a very, like, the hero and his love interest is a left anarchist woman, and he's a fascist, but he's a nice fascist because he gives the communists trials. So they get to the end, and they've sort of escaped the zombies. That, by the way, the zombies were brought by the Germans, which I really felt like that was Spain forgiving itself for fascism. And he's like, they're sort of like at the border, and he's like, you could just join my side and we could be together. And she's like, we don't have anything in common. And I'm like, yeah, and your side is freaking ISIS. Like, a woman is not going to join your side. Like, at that point in Spanish history, like, women weren't even allowed to, it was fucking Saudi Arabia. They weren't even allowed to like go out in public on their own. They needed a male chaperone everywhere they went.
I'll tell you the one that weirded me out. Have you heard of this anime called Gate?
Gate? No. What's Gate?
So it's an anime where a gate to like a high fantasy realm opens up in the middle of Tokyo, and like dragons and like dudes with spears try to invade Tokyo. And you think it's going to be like, oh, okay, they're going to have to fight these fantasy monsters. But no, the JSDF invades the fantasy realm and colonizes it and creates a greater Japan co-prosperity sphere in the fantasy realm with like
this
tanks.
Is interesting.
Yeah, it's really weird to watch because it's like Japan kind of forgiving itself because the JSDF are objectively like the good guys, like defeating the evil empire and like doing like a imperialism.
They're doing imperialism on Game of Thrones.
Basically. Well, like they ingratiate themselves to the population because they use like F4 Phantoms to shoot down all the dragons.
You know, I gotta say, there's something there. I feel like I could take that premise. I wouldn't put it in Japan.
Yeah.
I'd put it in the US because obviously. Yeah. But I actually really like the idea of you take like a Game of Thrones world where magic is real and fantasy creatures exist. Because people are always like, there are people always joking that like the fucking U.S. government was going to nuke Hogwarts.
Yeah. We definitely would, man. That would be that's a terrorist training camp. Like,
yeah.
That's going down.
So it was like, you know, I could see that happening, and it would be really, you could even like kind of more equalize the forces, because what I would probably do was science wouldn't completely work in the fantasy world. It would have different laws. So, you know, certain things would, so this is great. There's a terrific book series of fantasy sci-fi books called the Cold Fire Trilogy by C.S. Friedman. I highly recommend everybody read these. They're fucking phenomenal. It's part of a mostly dead genre called Sword and Planet. Because like in like the late 60s, early 70s, there were a lot of books that came out that had like, basically it was a fantasy story, Tolkien-esque, but it was taking place in the future on another planet, usually involving humans or human-like creatures. ElfQuest is actually that. People thought ElfQuest was sword and sorcery. No, it's not. The world of Two Moons is a completely different world. The elves are actually aliens that shapeshift, you know, and humans exist on this planet for some reason. So like, you know, John Carpenter of Mars, is that?
You could argue Dune in a way too.
Yeah, Dune, Sword and Planet, exactly.
Yeah.
Dune is a little bit more aesthetically sci-fi, but so the concept behind the Cold Fire trilogy is that basically Earth is overpopulated or dying or blowing up or whatever. And so a bunch of humans go into cryo sleep, like on a big, like intergalactic spaceship. And the trip is supposed to take hundreds of years. So they're all in suspended animation so they don't die while they're going to their new planet that they're going to colonize. And the ship's computer is supposed to find a planet that is like Earth that they can then colonize and live on. But apparently it takes so long, and the ship is just like, I can't find one. Fuck it, this planet. and it drops them on this world called, I think, Erna or something. And the thing is that this world has magic in it. There is a force called the Fae. And the Fae reacts, like it has its natural organisms that have evolved to work with the Fae. So it'd be something, it reacts to emotions and thoughts. So like arguably there's a species on the planet. It's not water, like it hasn't rained in a while. They need water. So the animal starts thinking water, and the Fae alters the environment to make it rain. However, when humans come, none of the creatures on the world are at our level of mental sophistication. And as a result, the Fae just starts making everything we imagine come to life and try to kill us. So it's like, you know, like some fucking vampires are popping up out of nowhere. Gods are being incarnated by the Fae. And one of the other really cool things is that because when humans come, they have fucking technology. They've got, you know, laser guns and all this shit, and it all stops working because humans don't know how it works.
Oh god. So it's the opposite of the orcs from 40K, because in 40K the orcs have a Gestalt psychic field around them, basically, and their technology works because they believe it does.
Yeah,
so red cars go faster.
Yeah,
like for orcs.
If you paint a lightning bolt on the side of something, it is. It's pretty much the opposite of that. It's like so like, for instance, if you have a gun and there is any thought in the back of your mind that maybe this gun is going to backfire, the gun backfires.
Oh, jeez.
So the whole series is really fascinating because it's got this huge faith component. They basically took kind of Christianity and Islam and fused them together into this invented religion that essentially, like, the job of the religion was to tame the Fae and render it unworkable. And so it's like the ideology of the religion prevents their god from actively intervening. Because, like, if you're a pagan and you've just like, oh fuck, I'm gonna go worship Zeus, the Fae will make Zeus, and Zeus will do shit for you if you pray to him. But also he's Zeus, so he's gonna be an asshole.
I'd be down with Bacchus, but that's about it.
Yeah, definitely. So yeah, like that's a phenomenal book series, and like the way I know that it is as good as it is I read it all in middle school and loved it, and took it to my grandma. And my grandma's a huge reader, and I was like, "You need to read this. This is so good." And she's like, "Okay, all right, Brent, you know," and she's going to read it as a tribute to me because I was her favorite grandson. Don't tell anyone else. But she read it and she was just like, "This is really good." And I started telling her about the rest of the series, and she's like, "Well, what happened to Siani?" And I'm like, so yes, it is a good book. This is not just Brent's middle school brain remembering something is good that's actually garbage. So I guess we kind of came in a long roundabout way of talking about I guess politics and religion here, which tends to be what I've been arguing about quite frequently on Modern Day Debate.
Well, I think these conversations kind of derail a little bit sometimes because the failed right wing of politics doesn't really have anything of substance to engage. So once we exhaust the fact that they don't know what they're talking about,
it's kind of hard to go further on that. Now, what was interesting that I saw was apparently Haz has done some very mild discussions about dialectics. And so, like, I'm freaking in the debate, I'm giving him Alan Watts, and then like his chat is like, "Oh, this guy came up with the dialectics on his own." I'm like, "No, Marx didn't come up with dialectics." Fucking in
Hegel
fact,
was the no, Fichte was really the first one.
Yeah, and I mean, Buddhism Buddhism is a dialectical process. It's always been like that. So, yeah, guys, I'm sorry, but Marxists do not own dialectics. And if you think you're the only ones who understand dialectics, you don't understand dialectics.
No, Connor was just in the chat saying he just read Dialectic of Enlightenment, which is an Adorno book from I think it was like 47, 48 when that was published.
Yeah. Sorry, I'm putting the sword back. So yeah, I mean, I guess there's really not a lot that we can continue to break down because, like, aside from like the obvious lies. So here's my question to you, Bobby.
Sure.
Because I have noticed. Oh, and by the way, I know that I'm getting to a point of fame now that people are making ridiculous speculations about me.
Oh, God.
On the Modern Day Debate chat, they think I have a ghostwriter.
Do you?
No.
I'm kidding.
I'm
man.
Actually a writer.
I'm fucking with you, man. I'm sure you don't. No.
But they're sitting there and they're like, "Oh yeah, someone clearly wrote this opening statement for Brent because he reused big parts of it in this other debate." I'm like, "No, I'm only writing that once."
Yeah, like why? No, why would you like write another like affirmative for like the same argument? Yeah. No.
And I also love it because they're like, "Oh, this guy's reading off of a piece of paper." Because guys, I'm not gonna go through the trouble to, to memorize it. It's not a monologue.
Like when I would do like collegiate speech and debate, like a 10-minute speech as a rule is 5 pages double space times New Roman 12.
Yep.
And that would take me like a month or two to memorize completely. Like,
Mm-hmm.
of course, which is always funny to me when people complain about politicians using a teleprompter. I'm like, that dude's speaking for 45 minutes. Like,
Yeah. And it's really funny also because like almost nobody on modern day debate puts in any effort on their opening. Like it's clearly they're just talking off the cuff.
no, because it's condensed down into the basest part of that product.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, yeah, the culture war bullshit that we've constantly got to deal with. Yeah. But yeah, so Bobby, but before we head out, because I think we are kind of coming up on the end of this, but I wanted to ask you this. So let's go to Ukraine.
Yeah.
Very quickly.
I was thinking about it, but then I decided not to.
Oh, I remember that. I think I told you not to.
Yeah, I think a lot of people did.
Yeah. So right now with the war in Ukraine, we've got the Russians have abandoned Kherson.
Yeah.
We had the slight scare where the Russian-made missiles landed in Poland, and supposedly those were misfires from Ukraine. Yeah. Ukraine insists that they're not. I don't really care. But like, what's your feet on the war here? Because I think a lot of people were worried that when they abandoned Kherson, they might like the Russians might try to do a dirty bomb or something because they were talking about supposedly like thinking that the Ukrainians had done that. So what's your feeling on the war right now? What the hell is happening?
The Russians are losing decisively right now. Donetsk has actually got a HIMARS strike on it, I think today. What I was reading about. So they're losing decisively. Their professional forces are completely in disarray. They can't replace a lot of the equipment they lost. A lot of people think it's like 1942 where you can just like roll out 100 tanks a day, but it takes like months to make a tank. Yeah. So they're losing like decisively. They're sending in untrained, mobilized troops with threats of legal action and starving them until they go to the front line just to plug gaps. So the Ukrainians are bombing areas thinking they're clear, and then the Russians are just feeding bodies there to keep them from advancing. So that's not sustainable for the Russian military. The incident, though, that you were talking about with the missile, I think is something that a lot of people are going to be worried about. So I'll say this. Really bad things happen in war. Horrific accidents happen in war. No matter who launched that missile, it was a horrific accident that happened. If it was the Russians, I would bet on the Polish being very upset about that diplomatically. I'm sure they would be upset if it's the Ukrainians too, but they're probably more upset with the Russians because they're opposed to them on the great power scale right now.
Yeah.
It's not going to trigger Article 5 like people are thinking it's going to.
Yeah.
There's going to be serious diplomatic consequences for Russia. I'd look for more sanctions, but I wouldn't look for NATO jumping in. We don't have to, as an alliance, actually commit boots to the conflict because the Russians are losing so decisively.
Yeah, so there's no reason to. So the theories that I've seen out of some MLs and stuff that the missile strikes was a false flag from Ukraine to try to draw Poland and NATO into the war. That's ridiculous.
It is. Poland probably would like to get in there because they're hawkish against Russia, but like it would take more than a SAM crashing onto two civilians, which is tragic. But it would take something more horrific than that for them to actually do it. I mean, like if you look at like the 1990s to 2001 in America, we had the first World Trade Center bombing that only initiated like a minor bombing campaign against Afghanistan. And it took the monstrous attack on 9/11 to actually start the war on terror. Yeah. It would take something much more than this, but because the news media sensationalizes everything, it's like, oh my God, will Article 5 be triggered? Meanwhile, everyone in NATO's like, no,
it won't.
No.
Well, it's really weird. Also, the Russia stands have been coming out. Now, Bobby, you know my position on this thing from the beginning. One, I'm going to quote fucking Treebeard. I am on nobody's side because no one is on my side.
Fair enough.
And two, my only position on this war has been that Putin needs to lose. Yeah. And he needs to lose badly. It needs to be the biggest mistake of his life, because if it is, that makes nuclear war less of a threat further on down the line.
That's what it looks like it's going to be, because I doubt they're going to hold on to any Ukrainian territory.
Yeah.
And I'm sure the Ukrainians are probably not going to advance into Russia.
Mm-hmm. Now, I have heard, and I think this is probably pointless speculation, but you can tell me, there might be a possibility that if Russia loses hard enough, China might start taking provinces back from Russia that Russia took from them.
Oh, like after World War II and stuff.
Yeah.
I don't think that the Chinese, the Russian economy and infrastructure has been transformed from like the Soviet era, the late Soviet era, which wasn't great, to a purely extractive form of like resource extraction capitalism. I doubt the Chinese want to integrate any of their territories. I think that's just people reading The Bear and the Dragon from like the early 2000s and being like, the Chinese are going to invade the Russian oil fields. No.
Yeah. That was my feeling on the thing too. I thought it was kind of silly. It feels to me like I don't think President Xi is, especially not after seeing what happened to Russia, I don't think he's going to be interested in war anytime soon.
No, and it's worth noting that a lot of the parts that are failing on Russian vehicles are bought from China. So I would imagine that the Chinese military is a little nervous watching this.
I'm not surprised because, during Vietnam, one of the things that the Chinese would do is the Russians would send Soviet-made AK-47s to the Vietnamese, but they had to pass through China. And the Viet Cong and the Viet Minh were super mad because they would get a shipment of weapons and they'd open it and it would be a knockoff Chinese AK. The China
the Type 56. It's a really crappy rifle.
Yeah. Oh, that's fun. So I don't know if you've seen, by the way, I was watching this was on my Facebook feed. I saw some live combat from like a helmet cam. Obviously you don't see anybody get killed or anything. What I found shocking about it, like it was like trench combat. So you saw them with I think they had AK-74s. And they had like one mounted machine gun and an American-made grenade launchers that are supposed to hook to a gun, but they didn't have the right gun to hook it to, so they just had the standard grenade launcher. They were supposedly fighting off a Russian attack. There were a few things that stuck out to me. One of which is, if you watch it from a helmet cam, it really looks like an FPS.
Yeah, it does, doesn't it?
Yeah. Is that I know you've been in combat. I assume that's not the experience when you're doing it.
You get like kind of more hyper focused, and you're terrified. I was terrified. So it's like a weird adrenaline rush, and you're just trying to remember everything from your training.
Trying desperately not to
piss yourself.
Now, one of the things that the guy that I was watching, who was giving analysis on it, he was saying essentially that you don't really even necessarily have to be shooting to hit someone. The importance is to get fire mastery.
So most fire in modern warfare is suppressive. So I want to so the first drill you learn, you can maybe even pull up a picture of this, is Battle Drill 1 and 1 Alpha in the Army. So it's a react to contact. So what you want to do is one part of your element will get fire mastery, what you're talking, fire superiority on the people that you're fighting against, while the other part of your squad goes around them and then sweeps them, right? So most of that fire is going to be to suppress and pin the other guy, where you can then maneuver and then destroy them.
Right. So it's more about harrying them. I found something on it, but it's just like
it's probably
there's no pictures. So
so you understand the concept. Like World War I, like most fire from like machine guns and stuff wasn't like necessarily like aimed at a guy. It was aimed at a formation to suppress them. World War II too. We actually ran into trouble in World War II at the beginning of it because our doctrine said don't shoot at somebody unless you can see them, but that didn't work out in actual combat. They're like, just start shooting.
Start shooting randomly.
Yeah.
So here's my question to you, Bobby. At this point, I don't think there's any realistic chance of Russia launching a nuclear attack.
No.
Or even necessarily even a chemical attack. So like they've been trying to advance and mostly failing. I know what remains of Wagner Group has been trying to take a city, one that Elon Musk was playing nice with the Russian guy about on Twitter. Starts with a B.
I can't pronounce it, but I know the one you're talking about.
So it seems to me like they like clearly Russia has gone on the offensive in the north. Doesn't seem to be working particularly well. What are they doing now that they've had to voluntarily abandon Kherson? Like, what do you think they're going to do next?
So they crossed the Dnieper River and they've blown up all the bridge crossings. If I was the officer in charge of the Russian military, I would change a couple things, because the northern part of their forces, which are completely pushed back across the border, are commanded by one guy, and the southern guys are commanded by another guy, and they're fighting over resources. You need a unified command structure, but I don't think they're going to get that. I think what they're doing now is they're trying to throw bodies at the situation to stabilize it until they can train more professional soldiers, and then try to advance with those guys, or try to retain what they have now with those guys. The issue with that is it takes time and resources to train professional soldiers, and they don't have the infrastructure to produce good professional soldiers in the first place. They're running out of manpower because they're drafting guys who are like 40 and 50 years old and prisoners.
They started drafting prisoners now.
Yeah, the Wagner group just did something horrific to a prisoner that was exchanged back to them. So I think they're trying to motivate their guys through fear. That doesn't really
work.
No, it doesn't. If you read Tacitus, the Annals of the Roman Empire, I always come back to this when I talk about fear motivating people. Is there's a centurion that he talks about named Have Another, because the centurions had a discipline stick, and they would whack you with it if you got out of line. And this guy was called Have Another because he'd crack it over a guy's head and yell Have Another, and then keep beating him. And Tacitus notes that when that legion mutinied, he was the first one they went after. And I like to think those legionaries were just like shanking that guy, yelling Have Another, Have Another, Have Another. It doesn't work. So Putin thinks
it seems like that's just really bad management in general. Like you can't terrify people into doing a job, especially not a job like that.
No, Putin kind of has this complex where he thinks he's Peter the Great. And I think he's operating on the fact that this would be like the Great Northern War, where, we might get beaten, but eventually they'll teach us how to beat them, not realizing that war has changed significantly since the 1700s. And he's rapidly running out of resources to actually wage war.
So it's kind of like he's thinking that, kind of like with Rome early on, Rome could lose an entire legion. They just replace it.
Get another guy.
And, Russia, even in World War II, lives
were cheap. Well, in World War II, you can make 100, 200 tanks a week. And now you'd be lucky to make 100 tanks a year.
Because the tanks are so sophisticated at this point.
Yeah. And if you're rolling out T-62s, which they are, they're going to get smoked when they come against modern equipment.
Right. Okay. So now I had a question here, because Russia attacking civilian infrastructure, power plants.
Yeah.
That's a war crime. Literally.
Yeah.
I had someone try to argue that it was strategic for Russia to attack the power lines, and that it was permissible as total war, which sounded like total bullshit to me.
Total war isn't really recognized by the Geneva Convention. So no. If the power plant, now I'll be fair here. If the power plant is being used to conduct military operations, like in Gulf War I, like if the power plant's powering the military base, then you can argue it's a legitimate target.
Right.
If it's like the local coal-fired power plant to power some village's electricity, then you're supposed to kind of leave it alone unless you absolutely have to attack it. But no, they're just doing war crimes, man.
That's what I figured.
Thankfully, they didn't. They damaged a dam, but they didn't flood the basin, so that was good at least.
Was that the dam, the one that they had mined, and it was basically the one that if Ukraine tries to cross the dam, Russia can just blow it. Is that the one that got damaged?
It's pretty much blown, but it's not destroyed. So I think hopefully that was intentional and not incompetence on their part. But they've blown most of Russia in a just world. At the end of this, Russia's going to be on the hook for untold billions of dollars to rebuild that country. Yeah, it's going to take decades to recover from this.
Yeah, well, it'll be interesting to see what happens there. Some people have been speculating that the Wagner Group guy is looking to possibly replace Putin.
He doesn't have the juice.
Yeah, I wouldn't think he would.
He's a hot dog salesman.
Yeah. Well, Donald Trump was a game show host.
Touche.
Hopefully the Russians are smarter than us in that particular capacity. All right. So, I mean, Bobby, what beyond this, what's your feeling at this point in the conflict, both the conflict between the left and the far right, ideologically, and as it seems to be the liberals and the for lack of a better word, the fascists, the totalitarians.
I wish there was a
world
better word
right
for
now.
it. I wish there was a better word for it. Well, in America, I'm very heartened in that we did not have a red wave recently.
I was so surprised, but yeah.
I just did a great stream with Connor, who's I see in the chat still. Hey, Connor. Connor and Rico Rance and a guy called Nate Talks to You about this. I'm really happy that we didn't have a red wave here. I think the younger generations, our generation, and the ones that are coming after us have really caught on to the fact that the failed right wing has no economic plan and can't govern. So, like, I think their power is hopefully breaking here as long as we keep building movement politics to defeat them. Internationally, it's really good that Russia's losing because fascist imperialism has been checked. In this case, it's not through like a workers' revolution, like we were talking in homage to Catalonia. It's through the combined forces of world order enforcing the sovereignty of a free people against fascist imperialism. So you know what? The world order did something good for once, so that's good. It's also good that Russia's economy is crashing and their international reach is crashing because they funded and fomented far right-wing movements across the planet. And I'm always very happy when fascists lose funding.
Yeah. Specifically, I know they funded the Marine Le Pen bid for president in France. And also, most likely, I can't see anybody else doing it, tried to get her... They tried to pull the same thing that they pulled with WikiLeaks on Trump, where they let out a bunch of damaging stuff about Hillary's emails right before the election. Tried to do the same thing in France, but France enforces a news blackout in the days immediately preceding an election.
Well, I'll tell you something, and it's a little messed up, but why I'm really happy that the Wagner Group specifically has been attrited, and why the Russians' power is weakening. In Central African Republic, a good portion of their economy is mines, right? Mm-hmm. And a lot of people were striking in those mines when I was over there, or they didn't want to work for the mine owners, or they seized mines as workers even, right? Or there were guerrilla groups that seized them. The Wagner, the Central African Republic actually lost a lot of international support and some UN support when they decided to bring in the Wagner Group to massacre the people that were controlling those mines. And in exchange for them acting as Pinkertons, they would get 25% of the mine's revenue. They did the same thing in Syria, and they did the same thing in Libya. They're trying it in Mali, or they were. But a lot of those guys are getting called home to go to the Ukrainian meat grinder. And you'll excuse me if I'm not going to express Christian sympathy for their plight. Mm-hmm. So you'll see kind of why I'm happy about that specifically.
I can see why you are.
One of them also pointed a 50 cal at me, so fuck them.
Yeah, I will express Buddhist sympathy because an injury to one is an injury to all. But yes, it's hard to have moral sympathy for people who
monsters.
They're just gangsters. You know. All right, Bobby. Well, this is awesome. Guys, if you all are watching now, go into the description, click the link. I have Durruti Shadow of the People #2 about ready to come out. Bobby, you do this too. And click notify me.
Clickety click, click.
Yeah. So I had said earlier that I would be partnering with a major Ukrainian charity. I still intend to do that. However, I found out that Kickstarter does not allow you to raise money for a charity. A charity can go on Kickstarter and raise money for a project that they are doing, but a Kickstarter cannot raise money for a charity as part of the Kickstarter.
That seems like an oversight.
It's really dumb. And Indiegogo apparently doesn't do that. I'm waiting to get 100%. So I'm going to be launching the standard Kickstarter for Durruti #2. You guys can go in there and get it. And then probably what I'm going to do is I'm going to release a charity issue of Durruti either on Indiegogo or Zoop. And that will be raising money to help people in Ukraine, hopefully, rebuild. Though I think I have a feeling. Do you think the war is on the edge of ending, or do you think it's going to go on for quite a while?
I think it's got at least a few more months left in it, because they're just. It depends on how long Putin's willing to keep throwing bodies into the meat grinder, and I think that he has a significant capacity for not caring about people dying.
Yeah, yes, he does, and he also has a pretty strong grip on power. So I don't see anybody, cooing him anytime soon.
No.
All right, well, Bobby, this has been freaking phenomenal. This has been Insurrection with Brenton Lengel, special talk about debates with online
weird people.
Yeah. I will hopefully the next time I do a debate, and I will get these debates uploaded to my channel as well. I've just been really busy getting stuff together for the Kickstarter. All right. So this is from Brenton Lengel to all of you. Keep making the argument for a saner, more compassionate world. An injury to one is an injury to all. Keep fighting to leave this place a better place than you found it. Thank you. This has been Brenton Lengel signing off.
And I'm going to go chop down some trees.
Oh, yeah. Oh, and Bobby, plug your pluggables real quick.
Oh, yeah. Mustache Mafia on YouTube. I'm Mustache Bob 2 on Twitter, as long as Twitter lasts. I might be doing like a Discord or something after if Twitter breaks, but that's a whole nother thing.
Oh, God. Yes. Elon Musk. We need to talk about Twitter.
Yeah.
On an upcoming
That's a weird one.
Elon Musk spiking the whole fucking thing into the ground.
Yep.
This has been 20. So the last 2 years have kind of been an exercise in powerful men that thought they were above the law getting checked by reality.
It's really weird.
Yeah. Trump, Bolsonaro, Putin, Elon Musk.
It's almost like material reality will,
it'll eventually catch up to you, no matter how hard you try to ignore it with all of your riches. All right. So this is Brenton with Bobby. Go follow him, like and subscribe to the video. And send me some money if you want to. Definitely follow the Kickstarter. All right. I'll catch you guys later.
Yeah.